Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, all the way from Finland, Mika Laitinen joins us to talk about brewing Hoppy Raw Ales. Mika tells us how to skip the boil and brew deliciously hoppy beers inspired by historic brewing techniques. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And many thanks to everybody who's helping out that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. First off, I want to apologize for my voice. Apparently have a good old-fashioned head cold. I took a COVID test this morning, and it was negative. I probably feel a little better than I sound. I could do my Johnny Cash impression, whenever I get a head cold. I won't do it for you, because I don't want to put you through that. But it's been a long time since I've been sick in any kind of way. Part of the benefits of being a hermit, I guess. Steve Wilkes came to the house last week and shot 3 video episodes with me. Financial supporters have already seen the episode on the gingerbread wit that we got from Matt Giovanisi of Brew Cabin. Matt also sent us a video postcard showing how that beer came together. Really delicious and nicely spiced. We also shot an episode on my Fresca Chandler that Matt and Josh Secor of Gambit Brewing and I formulated on this show. And the homebrew veneer ingredient kit that I bought from Ricky and Kelly of Grunfeld.com. That was a fun and tasty day. We've started a tradition of getting Mexican food before shooting the videos nowadays. There are worse ways to spend an afternoon for sure. My Belgian-inspired single that Chris Colby and I formulated on this show is in the bottle. It wound up pretty dry at 6% ABV, which is higher than I expected. I think the original gravity was like 1048, so I expected it to finish a little lower in the alcohol, but I'll take it. I primed it with 5 of those little sugar priming pills instead of 4 to give it a little more carbonation. It tasted great going into the bottling bucket, so really looking forward to tasting that and sharing it with Chris. Our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave of HighGravityBrew.com, want you to help spread the love of brewing, and they'll give you $30 as a thank you. All you need to do is go to HighGravityBrew.com, log in, and go to the Fermentation Points pop-up at the bottom left of the page. Click on Refer, share the link with your friends, and when they purchase a Let's Brew Starter Equipment Kit, they'll save $20, and you'll receive 3,000 loyalty points, which is equal to $30 to use on your next purchase on HighGravityBrew.com. So they save $20, and you get loyalty points worth $30 to use on your next HighGravityBrew.com purchase. You've got to have an account on HighGravityBrew.com in order to retrieve your referral link, and the referee must be a new customer. But that's what it's all about. It's about starting new homebrewers. Once again, go to HighGravityBrew.com, log in, and go to the Fermentation Points pop-up at the bottom left of the page. Click on Refer, share the link with your friends, and when they purchase a Let's Brew Starter Equipment Kit, they'll save $20, and you'll receive 3,000 loyalty points. It's a win-win, and the world gets another brewer. Maybe it's win-win-win. Check out this deal. Wordhog electric brewing gear and all the stuff that you need to brew delicious beer and wine at family-owned and operated HighGravityBrew.com. That's HighGravityBrew.com. Okay, whenever I talk to Mika Laitinen, author of Viking Age Brew, the craft of brewing Sahti farmhouse ale, I get inspired to try new brewing techniques. That is new to me, at least, because a lot of what Mika talks about has been around for centuries. Mika Laitinen, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here.
Your name came up the other day in a conversation with Adam Ross of Twin Span Brewing in Bettendorf, Iowa. He made a Sahti at his brewery, and he was praising your book, Viking Age Brews, in giving you a lot of credit for shaping that beer, and it was a delicious beer. So congratulations, you're having influence all the way over here in Iowa.
Thank you. Spreading the word about Sahti has been my main thing in a beer talk and beer writing.
Well, he really praised your book a lot, and I knew that he was going to be talking about it, so I brought it in here into the studio that day. And I was telling you beforehand, I can't find it now. I don't know where that book went. I had no reason to move it from where I put it right here on the counter in my studio. And so, I came in getting ready to talk to you today, and I looked for the book, and it wasn't there, and I cannot find it. So I don't know. We have what are they? Maybe a gremlin. I think we call them gremlins over here. What's the name for mischievous creatures that steal stuff over in your part of the world?
Well, for example, tonttu is the one special kind of creature which can take away and hide things.
I think I've got one.
Yeah, Tonttu is kind of guardian of the house, but if he or she gets annoyed, he can do really nasty things around the house.
Well, hopefully you're nice to the Tonto on Brew Day.
Yeah, I will give him some word.
Pour some out for the Tonto.
yeah, that's the old tradition, how to treat Tonttu well.
I think I'm studying Spanish on Duolingo, and I think Tonto means dumb in Spanish, which the Native American companion of the Lone Ranger, which was a Western character here in the United States. He was called Tonto, so in retrospect, not very nice.
Well, perhaps there is a connection. The Finnish word tonttu is related to Scandinavian word tomte, which is quite close to what you just said.
Oh, there you go. You get a free language lesson right here on Basic Brewing Radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now that we've warmed up, let's talk about the subject for today, which is no boil or raw hoppy beers. I guess we should start off by defining the term raw ale. We've talked about it in the past when we talked about sati and such, but remind us what a raw ale is.
Yeah, raw ale is a beer made without the word boil. So it's kind of historical technique for brewing beer, because in the late medieval times, brewers started to get big kettles, big enough for boiling the wort, and then they noticed that the boil makes the beer different. But before that, all beer was raw and made without the word boil. And of course, the word raw is not what was used at that time in a historical sense. They just called their beer or this raw ale. It was just ale or beer. And the raw term became later when part of the people were boiling their wort and some people didn't boil the wort, and these boilers started to call the non-boilers as a raw ale brewers.
So was there a certain stigma attached to that at that point then?
Yes, it seems that some people like the boiling a lot more, but some brewers like the raw ale much that they continue to brew it today, even to present times. And even today, there are many areas in Norway, Finland, even Sweden, and the Baltic countries where raw ales are highly respected part of the brewing tradition.
Is why would you want to brew raw ale as opposed to the more modern methods of actually boiling the wort?
Well, today we don't need to skip the boil uh, because lack of kettles, but today we would sometimes like to skip the boil to get a special raw ale flavor. Like Sahti has a really strong raw ale character, which is closer to the grain field. It's more cereal-like and thicker and more. Uh, I like to say mealy, kind of very nourishing and bread-like, a cereal-like character. That's one reason. Other reasons are well, it's very much easier to brew raw ale when you skip the boil. You don't even need to have a boil kettle, and you can save a lot of energy and time. I can brew a raw ale in 4 hours,
Wow.
and there's even a lot less to equipment to clean, and it's kind of very convenient and easy way to brew beer.
Now, in our conversation many years ago with Bob Hansen of Breese Malt and Ingredients Company, we were talking about the purposes or benefits of boiling the wort. One is sanitization. Another is hop isomerization, coagulation of proteins, volatilization of, say, DMS and other compounds that would lead to off flavors in the beer. And I think there's one more, and I can't remember. Maybe concentration of the wort. Making increasing the gravity of the beer. So those are 5 things. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown them to you all at once. But do you want to kind of address those issues and talk about how those issues are addressed? By when you're not boiling the wort. For instance, let's talk about sanitization first, or sanitation of the wort, sanitizing the wort. So how do you address the sanitizing of the wort if you're not boiling it?
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid of leaving the wort unboiled because of sanitation. But if you get the wort above 70 C, and then you certainly get enough sanitization of the wort. And when you cool it and add yeast, then the yeast will take over all the other microorganisms there. So there's no really sanitation issues in brewing raw ales.
And when you talk about pasteurization, it's another Asian, it's temperature and time. So it's if you're boiling, you're sanitizing the wort certainly in a much shorter period of time than if you were sitting at, say, 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 C for, say, an hour. I'm not sure what there's a graph of the more time that you leave a wort, the lower temperature that you can leave it at to achieve sanitization or pasteurization.
Yeah, when brewing raw ale, it is best to aim at a fairly high wort temperature at the end of lautering. And this can be done either with a step mash or fairly high sparge water. And this can increase the temperature of the wort.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about another Asian, volatilization, or volatilizing. When you are boiling the wort, especially with lighter colored grains, they say you are driving off DMS precursors so that you don't get a corny flavor in your beer. So if you don't boil, are you gonna have a corny beer?
Yeah, that's when brewed in the right way, you don't get the corn or I call it pea soup flavor. It's a good question and really important thing to consider. But the precursors of DMS are formed above 85°C. So if you don't never go that high temperature, then you don't generate the precursors of DMS, and then you won't have a DMS in your beer. But some modern brewers brew raw ale in a way that they take the wort and then heat it to almost boiling temperatures and then cool it down. And this is kind of problematic because then you generate the precursors, but you don't boil off the DMS. And then you can have a really nasty corn or pea soup flavor in the beer.
So 85°C is around 185 Fahrenheit for us backwards people. So if you're not creating the precursors to begin with, you don't have to worry about getting rid of them.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I've drank and brewed a lot of raw ales without any kind of pea soup flavor, but I have tasted some raw ales with that kind of nasty flavors.
So coagulating of proteins. You get when you boil, you get a hot break, and those proteins can settle out more easily from the beer. So what about coagulation of proteins in a raw ale?
That's the main one of the main characters of raw ale. You get more proteins in the beer, and this will affect the beer in many ways. First, you get thicker beer. It feels more nourishing and mealy, and then it feeds your yeast. You get a stronger fermentation because of these very nutrient-rich, protein-rich worts. Usually, the raw ale ferments faster than a boiled wort ale. And then, of course, it's hazy or almost hazy. And if you add hops, it will become completely hazy, like a New England IPA.
So it's not a bug; it's a feature. Having more protein.
Exactly. So, yeah, some people like it and some people don't like it. But I certainly like it, and I like to brew my beer that way that I will get this kind of protein-rich raw ale character in my raw ales.
So what about concentration? So you're, if you've got a weak wort, say when you start a boil, you can increase the gravity of that wort by boiling a longer time and driving off the water in the form of steam. So how do you handle the issue of concentrating your wort to a desired gravity in brewing raw ales?
Well, first you need to calculate your waters more carefully, your brewing water and sparge water, so that you don't end up with the too diluted wort, because you cannot reduce it down by boiling.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like to do slightly longer mashing to get good sugar extraction from malt without using more water, so that especially when you are brewing high gravity raw ale like Sahti, then you need to do very thick mash and slightly longer mash and slightly higher temperatures to get good sugar extraction from the malt without using a lot of water.
Yeah, I remember using your guidance. I brewed a Sahti, and in my memory, it's been a long time, but in my memory, the mash itself was extremely thick at the beginning of the process, because it was a no-boil beer, and I wanted a high-gravity beer. But I mashed, I think, at 2 or 3 hours at a fairly low temperature. And by the end of that process, by recirculating the wort with a pump and spraying it on the top of the mash, by the end of that, initial rest, the mash was fairly easy to stir, because of the time that the enzymes had to break down the starches during that rest.
Yeah, it's gradually it becomes more fluid, even with the lower amount of water. So it's kind of old technique for brewing higher gravity raw ale.
So let's talk about maybe the most important Asian, since we're talking about brewing hoppy raw ales, isomerization. Can you get a beer of substantial bitterness without the boiling process?
Yes, you can. And the trick is so-called hop tea, which means you boil hops in a small amount of water, and then add this hop tea into either your mash, wort, or even beer. And this kind of concentrated boiling in the water doesn't give as much bitterness as the full wort boil, but in my experience, it gives around half of the full wort boil bitterness. So it's can be made to any kind of bitterness you want.
So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like as far as the cost of ingredients into a beer, making a raw ale of a particular style, for instance, sounds more expensive than making beer in the boil way, because you're having to use more grain, to get your gravity that you want, and you're having to use more hops to get the bitterness that you want. Is that right?
I think not. At first it seems so, but when you get more experienced with the raw ale techniques, then you can brew it with the same amount of ingredients as the boiled wort beer, except with the bitterness hops. There's a difference between raw ale and the boiled wort ale.
And that's not necessary. On the homebrew scale, at least, that's not going to break the bank.
Yeah. And anyway, the raw ales are less sweet and require less bitterness. So you don't need so many IBUs as in a boiled wort beer. Usually when I would brew kind of pale ale with the boiled wort technique, I would like to have something like 35 to 40 IBUs. But when I'm brewing my raw ale, raw pale ale, then I use something like 20 to 25 IBUs.
I've still got a pouch of L25 Huga from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Yeast. That's the current seasonal yeast from Imperial. It's a lager strain, but I used it to brew the base beer for my Fresca Chandler concept. Fermenting at ale temperatures, it went from pitch to keg in 7 days, and it produced a delicious pale ale. And that shouldn't be a surprise. With 200 billion cells in each easy-to-open package of Imperial yeast, my stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon ale batches, and my airlock is usually bubbling before bedtime. And here's a sneak peek for you. Available March 4th is going to be the next seasonal yeast, A37 POG, a Kvike yeast that produces tropical fruit aromas at high temperatures and more delicate citrus characteristics on the lower end. I can't wait for my porch to heat up so I can put a bucket of beer out there and put POG to work. Ask your local homebrew store about all the delicious strains from Imperial Yeast and check them out at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com.
So let's start into the brew day. How do you begin, designing your recipe to accommodate the practice of brewing a raw ale?
Yeah, well, first thing in raw ales is that I have noticed that really simple recipes work well. I often brew raw pale ale with only high quality base malt and without any extra specialty malts. They don't seem to offer any advantage. And also with hops, I like to do it with a single variety. But of course, you can do whatever you want with this kind of technique.
Oftentimes, when you're introducing specialty malts like crystal malts, you're wanting to boost the mouthfeel and perceived sweetness of a beer, but it seems like that's not a challenge when you're brewing raw ale.
Exactly. You will have anyway kind of a rich and smooth and silky mouthfeel. About the malt profile, I especially like to have a really pronounced good base malt flavor, and that's I don't want to add any extra malts to mask the base malt flavor. So that's kind of my ideology for raw ales.
Let's talk about your gear. You're not going to need a boil kettle, at least not for boiling.
Yeah. I sometimes I use boil kettle for collecting the wort, but more often I brew raw ales with a very simple equipment, just a mash tun, which is usually a kettle, and then either combined kettle lauter tun or separate lauter tun, and then I usually use stainless steel fermenters, so I can take the wort straight into fermenter, and that's very convenient for raw ales.
So, do you need to recirculate the wort when you're mashing?
Yes, with raw ales, it's even more important than with the boiled bird ales because if you take all the wort even from the beginning, the turbid wort, then that part of that turbid stuff will end up in your beer if you don't boil. With the boiled wort beer, that would be precipitated in a tube. But when you're brewing raw ale, you really want to clear up the wort by recirculating the wort.
So I've got a brew in a bag system, and here lately I've been lazy and not using my recirculating pump and just stirring the mash, during the mash rest. But it sounds like that to brew, a nicer quality raw ale, it seems like I better drag out that recirculating pump once again to use the mash, the grain in the mash as a filtering device.
Yes, I really recommend it because well, you can brew okay raw ale without recirculation, but it will be a different kind of beer. It's more turbid and it's more oily, and also the yeast will ferment explosively when you add so many lipids and nutrients for the yeast. So it's kind of really makes a different kind of beer.
What's your mash temperature schedule look like?
Usually I like to mash at 66 to 68 Celsius, which is something like 151 to 154 Fahrenheit. And then I like to raise the mash temperature after 1 hour. I like to raise it to the above 70 C to 70 to 75 Celsius, because raw ales benefit this kind of temperature rise at the end. but it's not absolutely necessary if you don't want to or cannot do the second step. Then you can just use very high temperature sparge water to raise the mash and water temperature.
So it sounds like a fairly standard mash schedule, as compared to, say, a beer that you were going to boil.
Yes, it's quite standard. Although it's better to spend slightly more time on mashing, around 2 hours, or sometimes even 3 hours if it's very high gravity beer. But with this kind of pale ale IPA gravities, then you can mash it for 2 hours.
And again, you're not boiling, so you're not going to be concentrating your wort. So you have to formulate your recipes so that your gravity, which would typically be measured before the boil, is going to be your original gravity.
Yeah, exactly. And traditional brewers like to taste the wort towards the end of lautering to feel how high the sugar content is. But personally, I like to calculate the water volumes beforehand, and then I don't need to do any special measurements to stop the lautering. I just use all the water I reserved for the beer, and that's my gravity.
So typically, when I do a brew in a bag batch, I use all the water for the brew, as my strike water. So I don't do, I don't add any water for, like sparging after the mash. So it sounds like this wouldn't change my at least the mashing part of my brew day very much. I would just be using less water, during the mash and using the recirculating pump. But then, I would have to calculate in my head or on some paper maybe, how much water is going to be absorbed by the grain. And it seems like when I used to use a mash tun, because now I squeeze my bag. I squeeze the grain bag, which I take it you don't want to do if you're using the your grain and your mash as a filtering device. You wouldn't want to. It seems like that would be counterproductive. But in the old days of when I was just using a mash tun, I think we would calculate that each pound of, and forgive me for the units of measurement, but each pound of grain would retain like 1/10 of a gallon or something like that. So, for 10 pounds of grain, that'd be 1 gallon of liquid that would be, that would be stuck inside the grain. So, so in other words, you'd have to compensate, for water absorption by the grain when you're calculating how much water to add in your strike water.
Yes, with my brewing systems, I have several brewing systems, but usually I calculate 1 kilogram of malt takes 1 liter of water. That's a very well-working rule in my brewery.
So is there anything else that we need to talk about more specifically in the mashing process? I mean, at a certain point, you're going to have to add, if you're boiling your hop tea off to the side, at a certain point, that's got to be added into the process. Where does that come in?
And there's many ways to add hop tea to the beer, but lately I have recommended people to boil the hop tea for 1 hour and then pour it to the mash with the liquid and also the hop solids, because that's extremely simple and that it works with the pellets and whole hops and.
Would you add that at the beginning of the mash?
Usually I start my mash and then after after my mash is working, then I start to prepare the hop tea, and then when I'm finishing the mash, then I will add my hop tea to the mash.
During the mash out portion of it.
Yeah.
Now, is that enough time? It seems like to me that that would give an opportunity if you're adding the hop tea and the hop, debris at the top of the mash. It would seem like that would be an opportunity for some of that, the hop bitterness to be sort of absorbed by the grain. If it's filtering its way through the grain, is that something that you experience?
I think it can vary how the grains absorb the hop matters. It's kind of difficult to estimate. I think you need to calibrate it with your system, because you are brewing with the brew in a bag method, and it's quite different from the system which is the mash tun and then the sparge water.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's just better to start with the estimate that you get half of the bitterness that you would get with a normal boil, and then drink the beer and estimate is it correct, and then brew it differently next time.
So a little trial and error
to get a yeah exactly. Because it sounds like it's going to depend on the brewing system. There's no clear-cut rules for that works for all brewing systems the same. I could add about the hop teas. There's some actually plenty of methods to add the hop teas to the beer. One method, if you have whole hops, then you can sieve out the liquid into the wort and then throw the spent hops, for example, to the top of your mash. That's one technique which I used before, but then I switched to this adding hop tea to the mash because it works well with the pellets.
Okay, sure.
and yeah. Well, actually, you could add the hop tea with the pellets also to your wort, but then you get more hop matter in the wort, and it can be okay, but it depends a lot of things, and I think at this point we can continue into the flavor hopping, because it's also has to deal with this same problem with hop matter in the wort.
Yeah, now we're nowadays we do a lot of hopping to get hop flavor and aroma post boil, and even cooling down the wort, to add hops post boil. So, maybe this part of the process, adding late hops is sort of similar between the two, raw and boiled beers.
Yeah, it's probably not. But I have tested several methods how to get really good hop aroma and flavor into raw ale, and my favorite method is the simplest, and you just add hops into the wort when you're lautering it, when you getting the wort out from the mash. You add the hops into the hot wort and let them infuse into this wort. And this you can either add them in a hop bag, and then you can easily remove the hops. But I don't bother to do it. I just add the hops into the wort and cool the wort and let the hop sit in a wort throughout the fermentation. And it works perfectly. Yeah, there's in a boiled wort techniques, there's word called deep hopping, and this is exactly the same thing, or almost same thing. Deep hopping means that you put the hops into the stainless steel fermenter, and then pour some hot water onto it, and then you rack the wort on the top of the hops, and then you ferment the beer with the hops.
I think Matt Giovanisi and I talked about dip hopping on one of his beers. But in this case, it sounds like sort of a cross between dip hopping and first wort hopping. Because in first wort hopping, you add the hops, as you're collecting the wort, before the boil. So this is it's you could almost call it either one, either first wort hopping, but you're not boiling, or dip hopping, since you're adding the hops to the fermenter as you're racking the hot wort on top of it.
Yeah, the similarity with dip hopping is that you never boil the hops, but you heat them, and then you leave the hops into the beer, fermenting beer. But of course, if you don't like this kind of idea, then you can put the hops in a hop bag and then remove the bag before fermenting the beer. Sure.
And then do you chill the wort as you would chill, post boil?
Yeah, usually I first collect all my wort, and this also gives the hops time to infuse into the hot wort. And when I have collected all my wort, then I chill it to the fermentation temperature.
And you sometimes people use Kvike yeast, but you say on your article on brewingnordic.com that you've brewed many different kinds of beer, using the raw ale technique. So you wouldn't have to be restricted to, Kvike yeast. You could use, any kind of yeast that you wanted, as long as you chill to the temperature that's proper for that strain.
Exactly, that's the way it goes. And I certainly recommend trying your favorite ale yeast, which you usually use for pale ales or IPAs. Then you can really sense the difference between raw ale and boiled wort ale. But of course, as an advocate of Nordic farmhouse ales, I really like to recommend Kvikes for this kind of beer. They are really good and work really well and also very convenient when you don't have to cool the wort to more than 30 or 40 degrees Celsius.
Right. You've already got a short brew day because you're not boiling. Why? You might as well keep it short.
Yeah, and also the cooling takes only 10 minutes because it's so the fermentation is so high.
What are your favorite styles that you've been able to brew with this technique?
Well, personally, I like more pale ales than IPAs. So I usually brew pale ale with this kind of technique. And I have also brewed a kind of, it's kind of Pilsner, but very different from the normal Pilsner. I call it a hell bent for Pilsner. I can brew it today and next Friday I will have it on my pint. It's so fast to brew it. It's kind of speed up Pilsner.
Hell bent for Pilsner. You could brew a Helles. You could brew a Helles and it'd be Helles built. No, never mind. You'll have to workshop that name.
Yeah,
Hell bent for Hellas. There we go.
yeah, I think it works well also.
Pardon my puns.
But those people who like New England IPS, I think this is a great technique because in New England IPS you want to have proteins and polyphenols from the hop to carry the hop character into beer, and boil removes polyphenols and proteins. So the question is, why would you want to boil this kind of beer?
Mm-hmm.
It's so much easier if you don't boil. You get naturally this kind of character without any extra work.
And a lot of times, people when brewers are brewing New England IPAs, they're not adding a lot of hops during the boil process anyway. So from a hopping standpoint, you might as well not boil at all.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. And you might not even notice a big difference in flavor because New England IPAs are so hop-driven beers.
Mm.
So I'm not saying that raw ale IPA is better than the boiled bird IPA, but I'm just saying that it gives the same kind of beer with a lot less effort. And I think it's kind of natural way of brewing New England IPA.
So as I said, you've got articles about brewing, modern raw ales on brewingnordic.com, along with brewing sati and all the more traditional styles. Have you learned anything new since you've written those articles?
Well, I brewed a lot of different kind of raw ales, because raw ale is not just it is not a beer style. It's a generic technique. I've brewed multi raw ales, hoppy raw ales, sour raw ales, and even herbal raw ales, and it really bends into different kind of things. And I think it's worth experimenting with different kind of ingredients, and combine this with raw ale techniques.
It sounds like a good, especially around here where it gets pretty hot. It sounds like a good technique. I don't want to say style because it covers a lot of styles, but it sounds like a good technique to use during the summertime. When you're not wanting to boil anyway, you're trying to stay a little cooler.
Yeah, and I like to use this raw ale some special things. For example, when I want to test the hop varieties, then raw ale gives a really good beer for testing the hop character very easily. And because the process is so easy, I can brew 2 hoppy raw ales at the same time. I just have 2 really simple lauter tons, which I use in the same time. So it's really good for testing different kind of flavors, hops and trees and other flavors in beer.
Sure. Is there any difference that you can see in stability of a beer and sort of long-term storage over time, comparing a boiled beer and a raw ale?
Well, that depends a lot on who you ask. Some people say that raw ale that stores for a year or so, but my experience is that I like to drink raw ales very fresh, usually within 6 weeks from brewing, except the strong 9 to 8% sahtis and so. But usually I like to drink my raw ales very fresh. But then I like to drink also the New England IPAs very fresh. So it's not very different from the fresh hoppy beers.
Sure. You want to drink nicely hopped beers with lots of, fresh hop character. You want to drink them soon.
Yeah. But I know one brewer in Norway. It's called Bygland Bryggeri, a commercial brewery which brews a lot of raw ales, and they can raw ales, and they have served me a 1-year-old raw ale, and it's really good, and they can make it work.
Well, it's always inspirational to talk to you, or inspiring to talk to you. I was trying to get another shun in there, another Asian. But I appreciate your taking the time. I always enjoy seeing your photos on the Instagram, and you're an exceptional writer, whether it's in your blog or your book, which I have to find by the end of the day. I can't. It's going to bug me. I can't sleep until I find that book, Mika.
Yeah, hopefully you might find it before I release a new book, which is in a coming.
So have you got another one in the works?
Yes, it's I've already written it, but I haven't yet offered it to the publishers. But I really want to publish it in a USA. It's a brewing guidebook, so it's only for brewers, and it has one very long chapter about raw ales. Also chapters about farmhouse yeast and brewing with juniper and other evergreen trees, and many different farmhouse techniques applied to any kind of good beers or best beers.
Excellent. I look forward to that. Please keep us posted on the progress of that. And in the meantime, I'll look for my copy of Viking Age Brew. That's what it's called, right? I don't have it in front of me, so I can't cheat.
Yeah, exactly. It's Viking Age Brew.
And highly endorsed by Adam Ross of Twinspan Brewing. So you can put that on your website.
Yeah, it's not a thick book, but it's highly readable, and you get a lot of information in every page of this book.
Yeah, for sure. It's really good. All right. Well, I look forward to the next one, and thanks for taking time, Mika.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thanks again to Mika. After we got off the line, I searched again for Mika's Viking Age Brew book, and it was where it should have been, on my bookshelf. My bookshelf full of other beer books. I guess I'm forgetful but tidy, which is good. I look forward to reading Mika's next book when it comes out. In the meantime, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. And again, apologies for the voice. I'm going to go get some hot tomato soup. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well, and like me, and stay tuned. So long.